City. My mother is in assisted assisted living there in here in Bethany, Oklahoma. And so I still feel like I'm a part of taking care of her. And I do a Bible study at the assisted living place on Thursdays,
Okay.
and her place. And I have a large family. Also, I have 18 grandkids.
Mm.
I started with 5 kids, but laws of multiplication. I have 18 grandkids, and I even have 10 greats now.
Wow.
So I love my family, and it's good when I get to see them. But I moved to Oklahoma to take care of my mom and dad, so it's not my home state. But I was born and raised in California. But my dad was in the military, so I did move around quite a bit. But I am from California, but Northern California.
Okay. We'll forgive you for that. So,
Yes,
yes.
please.
No, I'm just kidding. I always say things like that, and I have one lady from, and just to get on to or get pull her leg or whatever you want to call it. Just I always make a remark about California, and she always fluffs up. And
Well, there's quite a few Christians and conservatives there, but yeah,
yes,
they get a bad rap.
yeah, yeah. I meet them every now and then, so they're good people. Okay, let's see. Sandy, I saw you sneaking in there.
She's right here. Hang on.
Oh, that you're not. What?
She said she doesn't want to tell you all about her.
Oh, she doesn't. Okay. Well, let me tell you about her. She lives in Wisconsin. She is a wonderful person and she bakes the best cookies in the world. So, and such a generous person. She does so much for others. So, just that is Sandy. So, we will. I got you anyway, Sandy there. Okay, and I did have the privilege of meeting her and Dwayne and getting to be with them a little bit. Okay, did I miss anybody then? Okay. The other person you need to get to know a little bit is you will see him as you enter in every week. And just we so appreciate Dwayne taking time for us on Tuesday mornings. And often he gets to do it on Tuesday night. So y'all just express your appreciation to him as well because he's the reason we get to do this. So all right. And then there's me. So y'all know me very well because you get to hear me talk all the time. So I won't do that today just because you will have to listen to me now talk about Hebrews. I do want to go to a little bit of study today. We'll probably get out a little bit early, but we're going to look at a Zoom here of, I hope, let's see, it didn't go to it.
Debbie, you could at least tell us your favorite thing to do while you're waiting.
My favorite thing to do is, okay, I'm going to have to stop share. My favorite thing to do is jigsaw puzzles besides studying but the Bible. I think y'all probably recognize that I enjoy the study of the Bible a lot. Let me see. Let me get my lesson. Yeah. But yeah, and when I'm not doing that, generally you will be able to find me working on a jigsaw puzzle. I like the big ones, the 2000 piece ones, and so it's fun for me. I told Cecil I think it's because I can find order there. It's just everything. It is peaceful. I'm usually listening to a book or a sermon while I'm doing it, and it's very just a nice time. So that's why I enjoy it so much. Any other, does anybody have questions for one another? I will let you do this. Do you want to ask somebody something? That I sprang that on you, didn't I? Okay. Okay. So sometimes you're thinking, now, what's that, and why are they, how do they know so much? I, every single one of you, I get impressed. I am so impressed with your insights. And so always, always feel fine about speaking out. And one person told me, and I'm sure that others feel the same way, that one of the things that they enjoy most about getting together and studying is not listening to me. It's hearing the insights from the others. And I agree. When we get involved in a Bible study, uh, we each one have been spoken to by the Lord during the week. And so those insights, that's why we want to get together and study. Even though I'm the one that's going to do like 95% of the talking, those of you who chime in and bring your insights into it, we all appreciate that. So feel free to do that. Except at the times when you hear me talking really fast because we've only got 5 minutes left. That's the time that's really hard. Well, it's all through the study. Let's do that. That's fun. Okay. Before we get started into this, I want to make sure, did everybody get your homework? The Bible sessions that I wanted you to study during the week.
Yep.
Yes.
Did anybody have trouble getting those? Okay, we're good. All right. So on those studies, it's not difficult, but I do want to point out that on the first lesson, since I don't have any new ones here this time, you will get to skip that very first page because it is for those who did not take the first one. Okay. So go on to the where it says note on the second page. This is the Bible study for those who did take the first part. So that's the one you will start with. I do have some new ones in my Wednesday study, and so I did that for them so that they can review the things that we studied that we studied last time. That way, it'll catch them up, and they can join us without any trouble. Okay, but you here all of you guys you can start on that second page. Since you've been through it, we don't really need to go through the homework. I do want to remind you, though, that this homework is designed for you to be up on things that we're going to be talking about for the next week. So it really helps when you've been looking at it ahead of time, because sometimes I'll say things, and if you haven't been looking at the homework, you won't really know what I'm talking about. So this is helpful when you go through your homework. Try to do it daily because it's a good habit. And when you do it all at once, it doesn't stick in your mind quite as much. So that's just for all of you educators out there. You know what I'm talking about. All right. Any questions about the homework or um, any of the connections, Zoom, and all of that? You all made it here good. So, all right. Let's get started then. This is our intro to, we're going to start with Hebrews 5, and we're going to go through 13. I will spend a little bit of time, probably in the first lesson, reminding us of what we went through the first semester because I've slept since then. And if you are the same way, it reminds it, I need some reminders. And it's so important in Hebrews because he really uh, has this focus in his head of this problem that he's addressing. And so because of that, from the very beginning to the very end, he is laser focused on this problem. And so we need to get that flow. We need to understand where he is headed and what he's talking about. Okay. So let's look at this. Does anybody, and I'm going to ask you to remember some things. Does anybody remember what the problem that the author is addressing?
Possibly returning to Judaism.
Okay, he is speaking to the Hebrews, the Jews, which is why it is titled Hebrews, if you didn't catch that. I have had people say, "Oh, that's why it's called." So, you don't think about some things. But it is written, he is writing to Hebrews, Jews who are we'll get to chapter 10, and it shows that they have been having property taken away from them. They're in persecution. They've had money taken from them because of their beliefs, because of Christ. And so the persecution they're facing, they're thinking, this is too hard. We're this we want to just live in peace and quiet, and that's what we had in Judaism. So we're going to go back to that. So the author of Hebrews is taking them to task, saying this is why you need to be careful of what you're attempting to do, is turn away from Jesus and go back to something that is not going to bring you salvation. And so this is what he is addressing. Because he addresses these things, we get to see several encouragements and warnings that we need to be aware of in our own lives. Just to remind you, I say the author of Hebrews or the author all through the study because we don't know who wrote it. When I taught college, I had one guy, he was adamant that it was Paul. And I asked a question on the first exam, who wrote Hebrews, and he put Paul, knowing that I had said we don't know. So so if you want to say it's Paul, that's fine. We just don't know who it is. Probably not Paul, because he states in Hebrews, the author states in Hebrews that uh, that he has learned from an apostle, that the apostles handed it down to him, and he says it in a us kind of thing way, but he's saying that he received it from an apostle. Paul would have never said that because he was adamant that he was an apostle, that Jesus appeared to him and taught him individually, and that this is how he became an apostle late on, he says in one of his letters. So this seems to be not from Paul. So we don't know, maybe Barnabas, um, maybe maybe Apollos, somebody that really knew the history behind Judaism, but we don't know. Okay, so when I say the author, you know that's who I'm talking about. Okay, we are going to be looking per we looked at warnings and the beginning of Hebrews, at the beginning of Hebrews. We looked a lot about concerning who Jesus is in the last semester. But this semester, the author moves on into the last part of Hebrews 5 on into the end on covenant. So you have to have a good basis of what covenant is. So we're going to look at covenant today as kind of a basis for what we're going to be looking at through the rest of Hebrews. The definition of covenant in the Old Testament, the word in Hebrew, because in the Old Testament it was written in Hebrew, is berit. And berit, you might also, for those of you who care, you might see the word berit written without the Y a lot of times. They'll spell it in different ways because it's a transliteration. It Hebrew looks like chicken scratches, and so they have to uh, put it in the writing that we understand. So it's spelled various ways, but this is usually what I see it. Okay, berit. It is it means in the Hebrews had this understanding of what it meant. This is what it meant to them. It was an agreement, it was a contract or a promise. Now, and here's an important part. Covenant meant in the Old Testament particularly, it meant a promise based on a relationship, that the two parties that came together had a relationship, and based on that relationship, they are that there is a promise involved. There's always two parties, but the two parties that came together, sometimes usually there was a one that had more to offer than the other party. You see this particularly in the covenant with Jonathan and David in Samuel, in First Samuel 18. You'll see that they came together. They were kind of kindred spirits, and so in this relationship between these two men, they formed a contract. They formed a covenant, a promise based on their relationship. They bound together as one, saying, "No longer will we look after our own individual needs, but we will look after each other. We will have a protection for one another. We will have a strength together." And there was just a strong bond between them. There was a oneness in that relationship. This is indicative of most covenant relationships. Now, you will see some in the Bible between two men who were just getting together to make a contract because they feared one another. Okay, there, Abraham and Abimelech. Abimelech was fearful of Abraham because he was so wealthy and powerful, and so he came to Abraham and said, "Let's make a covenant. I don't want you to hurt me." Was really what the covenant was about. So they made a covenant based on fear, but the covenant was a protection understanding and a oneness understanding. Um, the problem with make covenants made between men was they were usually broken. And we see this because then the next time we see covenant mentioned with Isaac, it was with the same people. So their covenant must have been broken, the same terms. So covenant must have been broken. And then we see it renewed again under Isaac, under Jacob. So a covenant was made. It's a strong binding agreement, but men are faithless, and that's what we see over and over again in covenant. God remains faithful to his covenants, but man will break covenant. Right. So there is also there are so many elements to covenant. When they made them, there were meals, there were gifts, promises, but there was nearly always an understanding of cutting. They cut covenant. It will say that often. You'll see those words. Why? Because blood was nearly always an understanding of covenant. In the blood, there is life. And so that giving of the blood made it very serious. And so we'll see that often, almost always in the Old Testament, we'll see that covenant sealed with blood. And they'll say, that's why they'll say cut covenant. That's what they're talking about. In the New Testament, a little, it's mostly the same understanding. They're an agreement, a contract, a promise based on relationship. It's diatheke in the Greek, or diatheke, if you want a real, a closer understanding of the way it sounds. It's the same, but it is with the understanding of one party being the benefactor. The word that would be closer to berit would be sunateke, okay, because that means two parties coming together. But the word for covenant in the New Testament has everything to do with Jesus. And so it is not sunateke, two people coming together with the same things to offer. It's diatheke, understanding that one party is responsible for the covenant. Okay, so there is that understanding in this word in the Greek, and of course, knowing Jesus, we get it, right? We understand why it is diatheke. Okay, let's look at the elements I had already been talking about, but let's look at them. There are promises involved in the covenant. Usually, it is from one person in particular, but the promises are stated, and so it forms the foundation of the covenant. Then there is the length. Usually this is connected to whether the covenant is conditional or unconditional. In other words, if there is if you make a covenant and there is something that is involved that you have to do in order for the covenant to remain, that and the covenant is broken, then the length ends. But when you have a covenant that is unconditional, it is forever. It's to be forever, to last forever. So the length is usually connected to that. Okay. There are signs connected to the covenant. You'll remember the covenant of Noah in the Old Testament. And in that covenant, there was a sign. Do you remember what it is?
The rainbow.
The rainbow. I said what it is because we still have that sign today, don't we? And when you study covenant, and then I had I've had several people come to me after studying covenant and saying, I've never been able to look at a rainbow again without thinking of God's covenant. And so it's these signs. We'll be talking about them along the way in talking about covenant. But look for them in when you look at covenants in the Old Testament. Look at the signs. Okay, and then of course we've already talked about this, the blood. So important in understanding the seriousness of covenant. it is a bond, a contract, an agreement that is not meant to be broken. It is much, when you say it's a promise, that's a real weak understanding because promises are broken. Covenants were made not to break. So that's a very important thing to understand concerning covenant. Okay, there were several covenants in the Bible. Talked about one, Noah. Talked about the three between men, Abimelech and Abraham and Isaac and Jacob with Abimelech. And then there is Jonathan and David. We've talked about that one. There is a Davidic covenant that's very important because that Davidic covenant states that it's between God and David. It states that his throne, he will always have somebody on the throne forever. Okay, there will be a king who will hold that throne forever, and of course we know that that is Jesus Christ, David's descendant. All right, so there's that covenant. Then we get into some covenants that are very, very important to our salvation. And so we're going to spend a little more time talking this morning about those three covenants because they're going to be referred to in the book of Hebrews. So these are extremely important for us to understand, although we will not get to go into them completely in depth like I enjoy talking about them. So as you look at Hebrews, remember that when you see these three covenants mentioned, this is an extremely important point to them. Why? The Hebrews have been under these covenants, the first two covenants, for thousands of years. For 2,000 years, they have been under these covenants. And so when they say we want to go back to Moses, they're talking about the old covenant. We want to go back to Judaism. They're talking about those covenants that God made with their people. And this is all they've known. Hebrews was written on the tail of the crucifixion and very shortly after the crucifixion. And so this is a whole new ball game for them. They do not understand completely that the seriousness of leaving behind Christ and going back to what they've always known. And so when you look at these covenants, you need to remember that this is this is serious to them as well. They're not just uh, going back to something that is not important to them. This is something they've grown up with for more than just their lives. It's been something instilled in the Jews from for a couple of thousand years. So, in understanding that, let's look at the covenants, these last three covenants. Now, the third one is the one they're leaving. The third one is the one that they don't understand the importance of. But the first two, we don't generally understand the importance of because we go right to that third one. So let's look at them together and see the mindset of the recipients of the letter of Hebrews, and that will help us to understand what the author is addressing. Okay, so the three major covenants connected to salvation is first the Abrahamic covenant. This is the covenant between God and Abraham. You'll see it beginning actually in Genesis 12. And so if you want to go back and look at these things, I would love for you to do that. I encourage you to do that. But for our purposes, we're going to be very brief and surface. The Abrahamic covenant between God and Abraham is begins to really be known in Genesis 15, because this is where he entered into that covenant with God. Uh, it we understand that this covenant passed down to their descendants through Isaac and Jacob. And then from there, the 12 tribes, and from there, all of the Hebrews. So all of the Jews are included in this covenant. If you were outside of the Jewish realm, the Jewish family, you could come into it. So we'll see people like Ruth, who was outside of the Jews, but she came into the Jewish realm, became a Jew. So there are those that are proselytes that come in. Okay, but generally it's the descendants through Isaac and Jacob. Okay, here is God's promise. He says, and if you read through Genesis 12, 15, 17, you'll see different elements. Basically, you can boil it down to three promises. Okay, there's the seed. Galatians tells us that the seed was Christ, is Christ. Okay, that the seed promised to Abraham is Christ. The land, the promise of Israel for the Israelites, and that God would bless them, that all of his protection, all of his relationship, all of his love, all of his mercy, all of that would be available to them through the Abrahamic covenant. And so it's very much a relationship where God is calling a people to himself. And that is what he always does. He is always looking for those who have a heart for him. And he's calling us all to himself. Okay, so this is the covenant, bless the seed, the land, and the blessing for the Jews. It is unconditional, because as you read through all of the Abrahamic covenant, and it's several chapters you have to go through to look at all that's involved. But as you look, you will never see that God says, if you will do this, then I will be your God. You never see that. God is just he sets his promise, I will be your God, and the conditions are all placed on himself. He is responsible for this covenant being remaining. Okay. Circumcision was the sign. There was a sign for entering into this covenant, and circumcision was that sign. You'll see that in Genesis 17. There is blood involved, first of all, with circumcision, but then he had well, actually, it was later than this. This is the first blood that was spilled, because it was in Genesis 15. You don't see circumcision until 17. But this is where you see the blood spilled. I didn't write this part down. Here is the promise, okay? And Yahweh brought Abraham outside and said, now look toward the heavens and number the stars if you are able to number them. And he said to him, so shall your seed be. And then Abraham believed in Yahweh, and Yahweh counted it to Abraham as righteousness. So that belief was the only part that Abraham had, and Yahweh fulfilled all of the covenant promises then. It rested on God. All right. Now, here's what happened. And I didn't write it down because it's too long. But I'm going to describe it to you, because you have to understand that the Abrahamic covenant was God's unconditional promise. What he had Abraham do was a ceremony, uh, um, inaugurating the covenant. And in this ceremony, he said, "Go and get," and he named all of these animals. And he said, "Cut the animals in two and lay them side by side." Uh, and so you can imagine all of the blood spilt in this particular covenant. He laid them side by side, and Abraham fell into a deep sleep during this time. So it was partly vision, partly maybe a dream. We don't know exactly what was going on, except that God then entered into covenant with him. Now he did this by a smoking pot and a fire. As you go through the Old Testament, you see that over and over and over again. God appeared to the people by a cloud or a smoking or smoke, and by day, and by night he appeared as fire. Both of them went through the pieces that were cut, okay, and both of them went through the pieces. And generally, in this cutting of covenant, there was a figure eight going around that represented this is forever. Okay. And so there is this understanding of going through the pieces, first of all, that it would be forever. Second understanding that was very important is this is the walk of death. What that means is that as the person going through the pieces went through the pieces, they were saying, in effect, may this happen to me, this being torn in two, may this happen to me if I do not follow covenant. If I break covenant, may this happen to me. You see the seriousness of this, the understanding that this must happen to me if I break covenant, all right? But who made the covenant? Who sealed the covenant? Who made the promises? God. Okay, so now we'll come back to that a little bit. I wanted you to go through it first, but hang on to the understanding of that cutting of covenant here in the Abrahamic covenant, because we'll be talking about it more along the way as the author takes up covenant in Hebrews. Okay, so the
Debbie?
animals were split into, yes.
This is Diane. I have a question, if you don't
I don't
mind. Um,
know.
so earlier when you were talking about the three items and you said the seed represented Christ,
Yes.
I always thought that the seed, especially in Genesis 15, 5-6, that your descendants will be, just the same as the numbers of the stars or more. So I don't, can you explain the difference or, maybe the similarity?
Yeah,
I'm not sure I'm following.
sure. Yeah.
Okay.
He now probably, well, I don't know if Abraham, of course, did not understand everything he was saying, but the seed meant to him descendants.
Okay.
And of course, what we do see is that the covenant went down through the descendants, that the promises were kept all through to today
Right.
because it was unconditional. All right, so the descendants were included. However, at one point I think it's in Genesis 17, he talks about not seeds, but seed, one seed. Okay. And so in that, the author of Galatians picked that up in the understanding, well, and that's Paul, picked that up in the understanding that this seed was more than the descendants. Of course, Jesus was a
Was a
descendant,
descendant.
but it
Okay.
was more than that. And he picked that up and said, "Look, this is the gospel that God promised a seed, and that this seed would bring about blessings, not just." And if you go back to Genesis 12, it talks about blessing not just to Abraham, but to the entire world. And so Paul teaches in Galatians that that seed was Jesus.
Okay,
Okay,
thank
that
you.
this represented. Okay,
Thanks.
anybody else? That is a good question. Okay, so this covenant, because it rested on God, it's not going to be broken, right? And so it is this understanding. It is unconditional. Abraham believed, and the covenant being kept fully rested on God. Now, that's an important thing to understand and to remember, that this unconditional covenant. Okay. Any other questions about that covenant? I'm looking at, oh, I said we were going to get out early. Okay, forget that. All right, the old covenant. The old covenant is, and you may have it, especially in Hebrews, you'll have it referred to in a couple of different ways. He might say the law, or he might say Moses, because Moses was the mediator for the covenant, even though the covenant was for the whole house of Israel. Moses was the mediator, and so they'll often say uh, they want to return to Moses. That they're talking about the old covenant, right? So this is what we'll see in the old covenant. It is between God and the children of Israel. It is conditional, all right. The other one was not, but it was unconditional. This one is different. It is conditional, and we'll see that in just a minute. We see blood as the covenant was inaugurated. We see Moses was directed to he was directed to have a sacrifice. The blood was divided into two, and he sprinkled the blood on all the people. Aren't you glad we don't have that anymore? this this is a bloody covenant. All right, all of them are. All of them are. Okay, so the blood was sprinkled on people. Here is the condition. Just kind of note it. Exodus, you'll read about it in Exodus 19, although the covenant is quite extensive if you want to read all of it. But it is God to the Israelites. So now then, if, and there's the condition, okay, if you will indeed listen to my voice and keep my covenant, then you shall be my treasured possession among all the peoples. This is a lovely covenant. For all the earth is mine, and you shall be to me a kingdom of priests and a holy nation. Now, that was to the Jews, and it was conditional. What was the condition?
If you will keep my covenant.
Right, obedience. Okay. You listen to the covenant, and then he went into the Ten Commandments and all of the things that they needed to obey in this covenant. And so he had all of these things that had to be um, taken seriously in their walk with him. And the people answered and said, "All that you have said, we will do." So they entered into covenant with this condition of obedience. And once obedience was broken, the covenant was broken. So this is very important to understand. It is different from the Abrahamic covenant, uh, uh, but with the same people. So hang on to that. We're going to look at that in Hebrews, okay? Then the last covenant that we need to look at, that is a covenant of salvation, it doesn't come to us in the New Testament. It actually comes to us in the Old Testament. Um, Even though it is the new covenant, God God explained it in Ezekiel, he explained it in Jeremiah, and then we see it mentioned in other places, but he gives a very definite uh, um, definition of it in Ezekiel and Jeremiah. So we'll look at those during the study. But it was unconditional. Why? Because the people come to it by belief, and it all rests on God. So we'll look at that. And then it was established by blood. How?
Trust.
Jesus' death.
Yeah, Jesus' death. Everybody was thinking it in their heads.
Yeah.
It's because of the blood of Christ.
Mm.
He spilled his blood for this covenant to seal it and to make it sure. Okay, because it is forever. Okay. Why is it forever? It's because it rests on him and not us. All right. So there is no conditional. You enter by belief, and there's no condition then. Okay, for keeping it. That is all up to Christ. And we'll look at that more during the study. It was inaugurated in Matthew 26. Here we go. Now, while they were eating, Jesus took some bread, and after a blessing, he broke it. Giving it to the disciples, he said, "Take, eat, this is my body." And when he had taken a cup and given thanks, he gave it to them, saying, "Drink from it, all of you. For why? This is my blood of the covenant, which is poured out for many for forgiveness of sins." Right? So there we see the blood mentioned. He had yet to give it, but right at this point, they were to understand that blood was going to seal the covenant. All right. So his body was torn and the blood was spilled, and this was the seal of the covenant, of the new covenant. We will look at that more later as well. Okay. Any, I think I have one more thing written down. No, I don't. Okay. Any more questions about the study?
I
That
have
was
a question.
good. Thank you.
I have a question
I'm
about
sorry.
next. I have a question about next week. Are you going to be
Yes.
studying lesson 1 or lesson 2 to next week?
Lesson 1. Yeah, this
Okay.
is if you noticed, I put on this one lesson 0. This
Okay.
is just an introduction kind of thing. So yeah, so
Okay.
lesson 1 is next week. And I apologize if some of you came to today thinking we were going to go through lesson 1, but that's next week. So
Good
all
deal.
right.
An introduction.
Okay. Any other questions?
I just want to thank you for explaining the Abrahamic covenant where they cut the animals in half, because I've had
Okay.
trouble trying to understand what it meant since Abraham was sound asleep.
Yeah. Yeah.
It was a good
Okay.
explanation.
Oh, good. Well, and we'll look at that more because the Abrahamic covenant is explained in or talked about in Hebrews. So we'll look at it some more. Good. I'm glad
Okay.
that helped you. All right. Well, let's start. Let's end with a word of prayer. And I just want to remind you that when since we have a couple of minutes here, um, I always enter into our study with prayer, and I always end it with prayer. And here's the reason. It's not an introduction or a benediction or anything like that. It is the understanding that we are entering into um, a, a study of God's word. And we don't want it to be just a lesson. We don't want it to be just something information that we get for our heads. It is something that God doesn't care if we read his word, except that it changes us, except that he means something to us, that our hearts would be entered into it. So all of that to explain that these little prayers are not introduction and an end. They are a giving ourselves to God and His Word, which brings me to each lesson that you study every day. You enter into His presence through the Word. Pray. Okay. Just ask Him to speak to you individually and personally through His Word. That is how you're going to hear Him. Okay. So let's end with a word of prayer. Father, I just do give up this time to you. I pray that our hearts would be totally given over to you as we enter into your word and hear you speak to us. I pray for these ladies as we go into the study during the week, that in their times with you, that they would be given over to you, that I would be given over to you. Thank you for speaking to us, and what a privilege it is to speak to the Lord God Almighty. We thank you in Christ's name. Amen.
Amen.
Thank
Okay.
you, Debbie.
All right. We'll see you
Thank
next
you.
week.
Next week. Take care, y'all.
Bye-bye.